How are we doing? Right? Good afternoon. Finally, we know. We know what the Wetterling family and all of Minnesota have longed to know since that awful night in 1989. We know the truth. Danny Heinrich is no longer a person of interest. He is the confessed murderer of Jacob Wetterling. And for that, he will spend the next 20 years in prison. Last year, as the chief federal law enforcement officers for the state of Minnesota, Special Agent in charge of the FBI, Rick Thornton, and I pledged to the Wetterling family that we would do everything in our power to bring them what they have been seeking since October 1989, what all Minnesotans have been seeking, the truth. And through the hard work of so many dedicated local, state, and federal law enforcement officials, we were able to keep that promise. I'm going to introduce in just a moment Stearns County Sheriff John Sanner, who has led the investigation into the disappearance of Jacob Wetterling for nearly 27 years. But first, I want to acknowledge the team you see before you, which has been working side by side to get us to this day. In addition to Sheriff Sanner, those dedicated officials are represented here today by FBI Special Agent in charge Rick Thornton, BCA Superintendent Drew Evans, Stearns County Attorney Janelle Kendall, and Steve Schlischer and Julie Allen from my office. There is great sadness and heartbreak in our state today, and an outpouring of grief for Jacob, for what he went through, and for the Wetterling family. But I hope that this is also a time for neighbors and complete strangers to come together and to begin the healing process. The unthinkable admissions that we just heard in court should, of course, make all of us angry. We will all ask, many times, why? And there is no good answer. But the crimes of Danny Heinrich should also increase our collective resolve to protect our youth and bring predators to justice. And I want to thank and acknowledge John Clark, the president and CEO of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who is here with us today. The center, which has the support of the Department of Justice, continues the search for other missing children and works to protect those who are exploited. Thank you, John, for being with us today. I want to assure the people of Minnesota that my office, working with the FBI and the BCA, will always honor the memory of Jacob by continuing the fight for missing and exploited children throughout our state. In a moment, I will describe the details of the plea agreement entered into today and the final days of activity that got us to this point. But first, I want to introduce Sheriff Sanner, my partner on this matter, and a man whose dedication to seeking justice for Jacob Wetterling knew no limits. Sheriff Sanner.
Thank you. Over the past several days, the response to this news has been pretty much the same. This is not the ending that any of us wanted, but Jacob's finally home. Our thoughts and prayers go to the Wetterling family. During the early stages of this investigation, hundreds of dedicated law enforcement officers worked around the clock in a desperate attempt to find answers. The community immediately pulled together to help the investigation as tens of thousands of tips and leads poured in to be processed. To say the public response was overwhelming would be an absolute understatement. During the first several months, local, state, and federal investigators built the foundation to this case that has been instrumental in getting us to where we are today. Over the years, I've been asked to look back and comment on things that might have been done differently. My response has always been the same. Our energy needs to stay focused on what we can control and not wasted on things we have no control over. I've also commented over the years that this is a case that science might eventually catch up to. In 1989 and 1990, DNA technology was something relatively new to law enforcement. Although today, DNA technology has continued to advance and is now a common investigative tool used by law enforcement around the world. To make sure we took advantage of DNA advancements, the Stearns County Sheriff's Office would routinely and periodically resubmit previously tested evidence to the BCA crime lab. And that is exactly what happened in 2015, when the crime lab notified us that Danny Heinrich's DNA had been positively identified on the clothing of Jared Shirel. In early 1989, Jared Shirel, then 12 years old, was kidnapped and sexually assaulted near Cold Spring. Investigators had long known that the Shirel case had striking similarities that paralleled the Wetterling investigation. That DNA confirmation triggered a series of carefully planned and thought out events. Using this information, we were able to obtain and execute a search warrant at Danny Heinrich's Annandale residence. That search warrant produced additional evidence resulting in the arrest of Danny Heinrich on child pornography charges. We then asked our federal partners to consider charging the case, as the potential sentence in the federal system is far more significant than that in the state system. As Danny Heinrich sat in jail waiting for trial, the significance of a potential lengthy prison term became instrumental in crafting and reaching an agreement that allowed Danny Heinrich to cooperate with the investigation. Of course, any agreement reached or even considered was done with Patty and Jerry's full understanding and support. Last week, Danny Heinrich led investigators to an unmarked gravesite located in rural Stearns County, where the human remains of Jacob Wetterling and articles of his clothing were exhumed. Today, we all heard Danny Heinrich in open court provide a detailed account of his actions on October 22nd, 1989, and take full responsibility for the abduction and murder of 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling. The resolution to this case is a result of several factors, a few of those being an engaged, caring, and compassionate community, the remarkable strength, courage, and faith of the Wetterling family, a steadfast commitment to never lose hope that this day would eventually come, and finally, the teamwork of all of the investigative partners willing to make compromises to reach a common goal, the partners being the BCA, the FBI, the Stearns County Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and most importantly, Patty and Jerry.
As Sheriff Sanner explained, we are here today because the state search warrant of Danny Heinrich's home revealed many items of child pornography. I first learned about these developments in a phone call with Stearns County Attorney Janelle Kendall. The county attorney and I have collaborated on a number of prosecutions with great success, but this phone call was different. She was describing information that could lead us to the truth for the Wetterling family. The county attorney explained the allegations leading to the search warrant and the possibility that Heinrich was responsible for the abduction of Jacob Wetterling. And I want to say a personal word of thanks to Janelle. Janelle recognized that the best way to get at the truth about Jacob was to seek federal charges, and we would not be here if she had not made that phone call. Two of my top prosecutors from the Special Prosecutions Section, Steve Schlischer and Julie Allen, took on the case. I created the Special Prosecutions Section in 2014 to handle complex cases involving multiple law enforcement agencies. I appreciate Steve and Julie putting their all into this case. Since his arrest last October, the prosecution team made it clear to Heinrich's defense lawyers that we wanted to discuss the abduction of Jacob Wetterling with the defendant. And we made it clear to Jerry and Patty that we would seek every possible way to get here. Over the months, there were times when it appeared that we might get to this point, but those glimmers disappeared. From everything we knew, Heinrich was a volatile and unpredictable man who could want to talk 1 minute and clam up the next. While we waited for an opportunity to negotiate with the defense, local, state, and federal law enforcement were all of one mind. Any plea agreement with Heinrich would have to include a lengthy prison sentence and a confession that could be independently verified. And of course, we needed to bring Jacob home. About 10 days ago, the defense reached out. And over the months, I want to be clear, we didn't know if we would ever get here. The defense reached out and told us that an agreement was possible that would include a confession and information that could lead to finding Jacob's remains. From that point until today, this possibility has been our number one focus. On Friday, August 26, prosecutors and defense lawyers drafted tentative agreement. It was two parts. Part one required Heinrich to tell us where we could find Jacob, and also required a full and detailed confession. If those conditions were met, Part two required Heinrich to plead guilty to the child pornography charge he did today and to confess in open court what he did to both Jacob and to Jared Shirel. The agreement also contained the provision that this would be global. It would include all potential state charges. The negotiators believed that time was of the essence. Heinrich was open for the moment to tell us what had happened. As I said before, we know through many means that he is a volatile and unpredictable person, and we knew he could change his mind at any time. Bringing in new state court lawyers to negotiate a potential state court plea would lead to delay that we didn't believe was worth the risk. We discussed this potential deal with the BCA, the FBI, the sheriff, and the Stearns County attorney. Last Monday, after all weekend negotiations and discussions with the defense, we decided to present this potential agreement to the Wetterling family. Last Monday night, I asked their attorney, Doug Kelly, to give them an overview of a potential agreement. Doug Kelly is a highly experienced attorney who has also worked nonstop these days for the Wetterlings, and we are grateful for his service. The Wetterlings told us through Mr. Kelly that they were interested. On Tuesday, August 30th, we all met together, law enforcement, the Wetterling family, to discuss the terms, and we were in agreement that this was not an opportunity that we could pass up. After almost 27 years, Danny Heinrich was willing to talk, and we had to grab the moment. I want to pause and do something a little unusual at this moment. I want to express a word of praise for the defense team here. The defense lawyers are some of the best I've ever worked with. They were professional throughout these discussions, and they operated with the highest integrity. They trusted us, we trusted them, and without them, quite frankly, we also would not be here today. After meeting with the Wetterlings, we all signed this two-part agreement. And by late Tuesday, investigators were prepared to excavate. On Wednesday morning, Heinrich was placed in the custody of the FBI, and he led investigators to the burial site that he described today in court. After the excavation began, one investigator noticed a red piece of fabric. And at 1:04 p.m. on Wednesday, I received a message that a portion of a red St. Cloud hockey jacket had been found. The jacket was consistent with the same one Jacob was wearing when he went missing. Each of us working on this case stopped in our tracks. And I will never forget that moment last Wednesday afternoon. Unfortunately, the location of the jacket did not produce other evidence that we felt we needed. So we decided to go forward with the interview of Heinrich the very next day, Thursday, to hear his story and to test his credibility. That interview lasted late into the night, Thursday evening. I was told close to midnight Thursday that Heinrich's confession was detailed and credible, but we still wanted more confirmation for the Wetterling family. Nobody wanted to live with any doubt. And so on Friday morning, investigators returned to the burial site to do excavation near where the jacket had been found. And it was a long, stressful day as we waited and waited for results. Late in the day, in fact early in the evening, I learned that they had made more discoveries. Bones consistent with a juvenile male, teeth that would eventually be matched to Jacob's dental records, and a t-shirt that said Wetterling. Finally, we knew. Finally, the Wetterling family could lay their son to rest. Patty and Jerry were notified, and that brings us to where we are today. Patty Wetterling is asked to speak at this time. We've gotten to know each other over these last months. She's my hero. Patty.
Thank you. Wow. I also want to thank everybody that has been thanked. The sheriff, Stearns County Attorney Janelle, thank you. The BCA, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Julie and Steve, the defense attorneys who worked out the deal. And that, I have to say a heartfelt thanks to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They do this work every day. They find missing children, and without them, I wouldn't be functional. I also want to thank the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. In his name, we've been doing prevention messages for a very long time, and that work will continue. And I also want to just say to all of you, the media, we couldn't talk. If you were in court, you saw he signed that thing today in court. We couldn't talk. We couldn't do anything that would get in the way. But I have to say, you play a huge role in finding missing children. You've been with us for 26 years. I view many of you as friends, and I am incredibly grateful to the kindness that you've extended to our family and the integrity of your reports. Thank you. What I really wanted to say today is about Jacob. He's taught us all how to live, how to love, how to be fair, how to be kind. He speaks to the world that he knew, that we all believe in, and it is a world that's worth fighting for. His legacy will go on. I want to say, Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know his last days, last hours, last minutes. I couldn't do this without my family. I'm proud. I'm so proud of the lives that they've built and the happiness they've found, and the children and grandchildren that we so enjoy. And that is the world. That is what gets us up in the morning. That is the hope. That is Jacob's hope. That is what we're going to continue to do. I also want to say one huge shout out to Jared and Joy. Jared had the courage to stand up and say, this happened to me, and there are others, and they found the others, and they talked to those others, and many of them will never get that full confession. And maybe it was Heinrich, maybe it was somebody else, but we know he had other victims. But they deserve so much credit for stirring this pot until he was willing to talk. Thank you. We love you, Jacob. We will continue to fight. Our hearts are hurting. We will try and pull. I would love to talk to you all. I'm just not ready yet, because for us, Jacob was alive until we found him. We need to heal, and we will speak with you. There's a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot more work to do to protect all of our world's children. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Jared, would you like to say a few words?
I came here today to remember the spirit of Jacob, and it's that spirit that's motivated me through the years, along with Patty Wetterling, the other victims that I've learned to know and become friends with. I've also learned to know and become friends with a lot of the law enforcement up here today. I was thrown into this investigation not by choice, but because I was a victim of an assault that in so many ways defined who I am today. If you would have asked me 25 years ago what my purpose in life was, I wouldn't have had an answer. If you would have asked me 18 years ago what my purpose in life was, I would have told you my daughter. Today, I'm in a moment of transcending or finding a new purpose and helping others gain closure in what they need to move on, to move forward, and to keep it positive. So, despite everything that is going on right now, once it all slows down, I hope to open the doors to the Painesville community. For starters, it's where I've lived for the last 27 years. Unbeknown to me that Jacob was resting there the whole time. The irony in that is surreal. And I think as a member of the community, I think I can say that we're willing to create something positive out of all of this tragic news. And as heartbreaking as it is, I promised Patty 3 years ago when I got involved that I was going to try to keep it positive, and that's been my pledge. I just want to highlight on that. Thank you.
In closing, I'll tell you that each of the people up here with me today experienced this emotional and heartbreaking case in their own way. This was not the result any of us wanted. I could not be prouder of the collaboration between the FBI, sheriff, the county attorney, and the BCA to get this done. I wish we had a different result. But the people standing with me today delivered what we could, the truth. On October 22nd, 1989, Danny Heinrich murdered a young boy. On that day, he stole our innocence. Today, he is facing justice. Thank you. Rick?
First and most importantly, I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the Wetterling family. In spite of the enormity of their own personal loss, Patty and Jerry Wetterling have been an inspiration over the years through their advocacy to so many others who have experienced the loss of a child. In addition, Patty's work at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has literally changed the entire landscape with respect to how we deal with these types of crimes all across the United States and around the world. Today is a very sad but important day for Minnesota. We can now answer the question that for the past almost 27 years, people in Minnesota, the upper Midwest, and all around the United States have been asking. And all of the answers we found is horrific. We now know what happened to Jacob Wetterling. These types of crimes just didn't happen in rural Minnesota in 1989, or so we thought. The unfortunate truth, then and now, is there are evil people in this world who choose to hurt others. On October 22, 1989, Jacob Wetterling crossed paths with Danny James Heinrich in St. Joseph, Minnesota, and this evil serial predator stole the life and future of an innocent 11-year-old boy. While there's nothing any of us can do to make Jacob's murder any less tragic, I hope bringing Danny Heinrich to justice and answering the question of what happened to Jacob will bring the Wetterling family some measure of comfort. I want to thank Sheriff John Sanner and the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, Superintendent Drew Evans of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for their partnership and for their steadfast commitment to this investigation. There were many untold officers and agents from a number of agencies who contributed to the outcome we are telling you about today. I also want to acknowledge the critical contribution of our prosecution partners, United States Attorney Andy Luger and the assisting United States attorneys from the District of Minnesota. Also want to thank Stearns County Attorney Janelle Kendall. These lawyers did amazing work, and they often don't get the credit they deserve. We would not have just witnessed Danny Heinrich's guilty plea without the skill, determination, and commitment of our prosecutors. This outcome is proof of what we can accomplish when law enforcement and prosecutors work together at the federal, state, and local level. When the FBI proposed a cold case review with the assistance of an expert from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team 2 years ago, our partners agreed to this and embraced the opportunity to have a new set of eyes help take a fresh look at this voluminous and complex case file. I am extraordinarily proud of the FBI and of all the law enforcement personnel, past and present, who poured their hearts and souls into this investigation, seeking justice for Jacob and answers for everyone. They are true professionals, and their individual and collective efforts made a difference. 27 years is a very long time for an investigation to remain open and active. We are here today because of the perseverance of the investigative team, the commitment to aggressively follow up on every single lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, and the absolute belief that if we continued to press, we would eventually solve this case. Finally, I want to thank Patty and Jerry for their patience and for their support of law enforcement over the years on Jacob's case. Thank you very much.
My name is Janelle Kendall. I am the Stearns County Attorney. To help understand how we got here today, I will explain Stearns County's legal options in this investigation and how they led to the decision to seek a federal prosecution. From the beginning, finding Jacob Wetterling was the point of this investigation. As I will explain, because of the 1989 limitations in Minnesota law, finding Jacob literally had to happen before any other legal steps could be taken. Through publication of search warrants drafted by Stearns County authorities, the public is already aware that the Stearns County Sheriff's Office asked the FBI to partner with them to re-examine all evidence in the Wetterling abduction in 2014. Through that process, the Sheriff's Office also asked the Minnesota BCA lab to retest the sweatshirt worn by Jared Shirel when he was abducted in Cold Spring in January of 1989. In early 2015, scientific testing methods not available at the BCA lab until recently revealed a DNA match, a 100% certainty that Danny Heinrich committed the Shirel assault. Heinrich had long ago been arrested for that crime, but Jared could not identify him in a lineup, and investigators at that time determined there was insufficient evidence to charge him with the offense. However, with this new evidence, investigators were certain that Heinrich had committed the crime. The evidence prior to last week in the Wetterling abduction was also made public through search warrants. Although similarities between the Shirel assault, several prior assaults in Painesville, and Jacob's abduction existed, the only physical evidence tying Heinrich to a Jacob Wetterling abduction was a tire track very similar, though not scientifically matched to Heinrich's vehicle, and a shoe print, again, similar to a set of those taken from Heinrich, but again, not scientifically matched. Heinrich repeatedly denied he did any of these crimes. The DNA match in the Shirel case set in motion the search warrant of Heinrich's residence in July of 2015. Although we found little to further the Shirel or Wetterling investigations, we found Heinrich in possession of hundreds of images of child pornography. With that evidence in hand, we did extensive research into the statute of limitations. We concluded that the ability to prosecute these crimes going back to 1989 had expired. There was literally no legal avenue to prosecute Heinrich in state or federal court for the Shirel assault or the series of Painesville assaults that happened just before that. Likewise, even if the tire and shoe prints, plus the Shirel assaults and Painesville assaults were admissible in court regarding the Wetterling abduction, the most important thing and the only thing that could be proven was kidnapping. Both kidnapping and assault of Jacob Wetterling were likewise beyond the statute of limitations. The only remaining charge that we could pursue was murder. And to prove murder, we had to be able to prove that Jacob Wetterling died. Up until last Friday, proof that Jacob Wetterling was no longer alive did not exist. We did not have proof of murder. So we literally had to find Jacob in order to move forward at all. Because of greater federal sentencing consequences compared to those available in a state law prosecution for child pornography, I called United States Attorney Andy Lugar and asked for consideration of his exercise of federal jurisdiction on the child pornography case, literally seeking leverage that a substantial federal prison sentence could provide to further the Wetterling investigation. The United States Attorney's Office took the case. Steve and Julie successfully defended Stearns County's investigation and our search warrants in recent weeks. Last Tuesday, after consultation with Jerry and Patty, this team of local, state, and federal authorities reached this agreement for Heinrich to take us to the remains of Jacob Wetterling and give a full statement of what he did, how he did it, and why. Our goal was proof, answers, accountability, and that, you should know, Heinrich would not plead guilty to a murder we could not prove. As a result of this federal prosecution, he will go to prison for 20 years. He also acknowledged today in open court that he is aware he will be evaluated for sex offender commitment at the end of that prison sentence and may never be released from custody again. What was most important to the Wetterlings was to bring Jacob home and know what happened to him. The team of investigators will tell you it was difficult to find those remains, even with Heinrich's help, and that Jacob would not have been found and the details would not have been told without the events of today. This event in the history of Minnesota, and especially in the history of Stearns County, could not have been accomplished without every member of this local, state, and national team. And despite the complication of this path, this case demonstrates that no case is too hard to solve. No tip is too insignificant to consider, and no legal obstacle insurmountable in finding answers and accountability for Jacob Wetterling and everyone near and far who knows his name. We never stopped looking for Jacob, and none of us will ever forget the moment that we found him. Our condolences and sympathies remain with the Wetterling family.
Good afternoon. My name is Drew Evans. I am the Superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. First of all, I would like to just express my greatest sympathies to the Wetterling family. Your strength and courage over the years has inspired us all, and we grieve along with you today as a state. Today, DNA testing by the BCA has confirmed through DNA that the remains we found last week were Jacob Wetterling. In some long, unsolved cases, leads go quiet, and there can be long stretches where there's no activity in a case at all. That was never the case with Jacob Wetterling's case. We looked for Jacob Wetterling for all these years with all of you, with our entire country, for the family. In the almost 27 years since Jacob disappeared, investigators from the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, the BCA, and the FBI have constantly worked to develop new information, follow new leads, and look for new ways to approach this case. It's one of the reasons our investigative team last year decided to ask the United States Attorney's Office to prosecute Mr. Heinrich's child pornography case. Federal child pornography charges carry longer penalties than state charges. We believed then that Mr. Heinrich was involved in Jacob's disappearance. With the prospect of a longer federal penalty for child pornography facing Mr. Heinrich, we believed it could lead to Mr. Heinrich finally cooperating with investigators to tell us what he knew. That bet paid off last week as he led the investigative team to a rural site in Stearns County where investigators from the agencies I mentioned and the BCA crime scene team located human remains. For nearly 3 decades, BCA agents have worked in partnership with the Stearns County Sheriff's Office and the FBI to pursue every lead and uncover every detail to find Jacob. Scientists in the BCA laboratory have tested and analyzed evidence in this case dating back to before DNA testing was possible. Last fall, BCA scientists connected Heinrich through DNA to another victim, Jared Scheidel, to give us the proof that Heinrich was the perpetrator in that case. That eventually led to Heinrich's arrest on the charges he faced today. And this investigation is not over. We continue to have work to do. as we continue to provide more and more answers for the family. Lastly, Jacob's hope was always about bringing Jacob home and bringing him home alive. And tragically, that didn't happen like we wanted to see it turn out. However, for all of us, Jacob's hope continues to live on and inspire us to make Minnesota a safer place for children, to protect our children, and as the U.S. Attorney mentioned, we will continue to work to do that every day for all the children in our state. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Slisher, Chief of the Special Prosecutions Section of the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with Julie Allen. As part of the Special Prosecutions Trial Team, we would like to express our deep gratitude, our humble thanks for allowing us to participate and be a small part of this effort to find the truth about what happened to Jacob. This case was difficult for us. It involved the most intense legal challenges and battles that we have had in our 20 years of prosecution experience. We thank our talented state and federal partners for the amazing work that they have done and brought to us. We thank Jared for his courage, and we extend our sympathies to the Wetterlings, to everyone who loved Jacob. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a few questions.
Can you offer us any insight into why this happened now? Was there any indication that Mr. Heinrich offered about why his mind changed?
Well, no, but I can tell you from my experience, as a trial comes closer and the prospect of a long sentence is looming, people sometimes change their mind about what they're going to do. And that's the reason Janelle called me in the first place. That's the reason we're here. The prospect under federal child pornography laws and sentences that Mr. Heinrich would be seeing a long prison sentence, I think, led to where we are today. The other thing, though, is, and this became clear just from everything we know about him, he needed to build trust in his own lawyers. He needed to feel confident in the work that they were doing. And so, as Steve Schlischer just told you, we had legal challenges in this case. His lawyers pursued every possible avenue to get the case thrown out. And when those looked like they were failing, and when he had the faith and confidence in his own lawyers, and also was staring at the potential of a long sentence, that's why I believe we got the phone call we got 10 days ago.
Do you think there's any other victims after Jacob?
I'm sorry.
Express any remorse to his attorneys or to anybody?
I don't know whether he expressed remorse to his attorneys. I don't believe that there was remorse expressed to us. And we weren't looking for it. We would like it, but this is a man who committed an unspeakable, horrible act that changed our entire state and obviously the lives of the Wetterling family. So remorse or not, we needed to get justice. Yes, sir.
Do you think there were any victims after Jacob?
We're not aware of any. Yeah, somebody over here. Yes.
Along those lines, is he being looked at as a possible suspect in any other child disappearances?
Not that I'm aware of. Yes.
Did he give any indication why he let possible other victims go, but not Jacob?
You know, my impression from what he has said to us is that he heard a cop car go by and he panicked. Yes. Yes.
Do you know if this was an area that had ever been subject to any kind of search?
Sheriff, I'm not aware. Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I did. The specific area, I'm not sure if it was ever searched. It was on private property, but I know the entire citizenry of Stearns County was looking constantly for many, many years. So I can't answer if that particular area was looked at. It could have, it might not have been. It was very remote.
Are you able to provide more detail on the timeline that Heinrich confessed to? For example, how long he was driving around, the time that he eventually ended up at his house that night?
Steve?
We're unable to provide any details beyond what he testified to in court today.
Okay. Thanks.
So the angel things were not mentioned in court. Can you say, do you believe that he did those as well?
I'm not going to comment on that. We worked very, very hard over the last 10 days to get this man to tell us what he did to Jacob, what he did to Jared, and we believe what he told us about them. Yes, yes.
Can you talk about the difficulty in making this plea deal?
I think we will all agree that this took a lot of work, and it took a lot of people working together, and it took the confidence of the Wetterling family in us to do our jobs. I will tell you, if you asked each one of us, we would say that the last 10 days have been the most difficult professionally in our lives, because we were waiting for this moment today, and we didn't know if it would ever come. And with every passing day, we were concerned that this volatile man would change his mind. And for the Wetterlings, we just did not want that to happen.
Well, could you go into detail? He seemed calm in
Right.
court today. Can you talk about how volatile some of these conversations have been?
No, but he is not a calm man, and we knew that going into these discussions, and we knew we had a limited amount of time before he could change his mind. And I've been practicing criminal law as a prosecutor and also as a defense lawyer for 30 years. I've seen that kind of volatility. I've seen people change their mind, and nobody compares to Danny Heinrich in my experience.
Mr. Lucas,
Yes.
Paul Bloom,
Yeah,
I'm
Paul.
just kind of curious, do you, I'm going to lose my train of thought here. Do you believe he kept that secret with himself to this day? Or do you think he shared something along the way that he ever
Paul,
had any conversation?
Paul, I'm not going to try to read into Danny Heinrich's mind and who he might have talked to, but we're not aware. Yes.
Just going to take two more questions.
All right.
At what point did you feel like you had the right man? Does it date back a year ago, longer than that?
I can't speak for everybody, but reviewing the evidence that we had a year ago after the search warrant, I was confident we did. We came to this room and described him as a person of interest. It's not something that any of us do lightly, but we needed proof. One more.
So many people.
Well, you've already gotten one, so yeah, it's okay. Yes.
People would say that Heinrich isn't really getting away with murder. Do you feel that was the price that he paid?
Well, absolutely not. We worked this child pornography case hard to get us to the point where this man would take us to Jacob and confess for what he did. He's 53 years old. He will do 20 years in a federal prison, and after that, potentially more time under civil laws. He's not getting away with anything. We got the truth. The Wetterling family can bring him home, and it's time for all of us to have the closure and the peace that we're hoping can come next. Thank you.